Anjali adjusted the strap of her worn-out leather bag and sighed as she walked along the busy city street. The world around her bustled with life, cars honking, vendors shouting, office workers rushing to meetings, but inside her heart, she carried a storm. Her rent was overdue, her job interview that morning hadn't gone the way she hoped, and the last of her savings lay folded in her wallet, a few crumpled notes that would barely cover her groceries for the week. Yet despite her struggles, there was something about Anjali that set her apart. Her brown eyes carried warmth, and even when life pressed down on her shoulders, she found reasons to care for others. It was on this street, under the shadow of an old, crumbling building, that she first saw him. He was sitting against the wall, his beard long and tangled, his coat faded from years of use. Beside him rested a tattered brown satchel. People passed him without even a glance, some tightening their grip on their bags as though his poverty might somehow reach out and steal from them. Others muttered under their breath, annoyed that he was dirtying the clean streets of their precious city. But Anjali's step slowed. She felt a strange pull. The man's eyes, gray with a depth that seemed to hold untold stories, met hers for a brief second. He didn't raise his hand to beg like others did. He simply looked at her, calm and quiet, as though he was invisible and didn't expect anyone to see him. Anjali's heart clenched. Poor soul, she whispered to herself. Her wallet felt heavier in her bag. She knew exactly how much money was left inside, barely enough to get by. But something inside her refused to walk away. She crouched down in front of him. "Sir," she said softly, her voice cutting through the noise of the city. "Are you hungry?" The man tilted his head. For a moment, he studied her face. Then, with a low voice, he answered, "Hunger is a companion I know too well." The words made Anjali swallow hard. She reached into her bag, pulled out the last of her money, folded bills she had been saving for bread and milk, and held it out to him. "This is all I have," she admitted honestly, "but please take it. Buy yourself a meal." For the first time, the man's lips curved into a faint smile. It wasn't the kind of smile of someone receiving charity, but rather the kind of smile one gives when they've just discovered a rare truth about the world. "Why would you give away your last?" he asked, his voice raspy but curious. Anjali shrugged. "Because you look like you need it more than I do. And I believe kindness comes back somehow." The man slowly extended his rough, weathered hands and accepted the bills. His fingers brushed against hers, and she felt the calluses, the years of hardship etched into his skin. "My name is Watson," he said after a pause, his voice carrying both mystery and gravity. "Anjali," she replied. For a few moments, silence sat between them, broken only by the chaos of the city around. "You don't know what you've just done," Watson murmured cryptically, looking at the money. Anjali gave him a puzzled glance. "It's not much. Don't worry about it." But Watson's eyes told a different story. They twinkled, as though he held a secret far greater than the streets he sat on. That evening, as Anjali walked back to her small rented room, she thought of Watson. She replayed his words in her mind. "You don't know what you've just done." They echoed like a riddle. Meanwhile, Watson remained on the sidewalk, still holding the money. He could feel the weight of the bills, not in their value, but in the intent behind them. He had seen thousands walk by, pretending he didn't exist. But this girl, with nothing to her name, had given him everything she had left. And Watson, though no one knew it, was not who he seemed. Beneath the layers of dirt, the unkempt beard and the ragged clothes, he was a man of vast wealth. A man who owned properties, businesses, and assets hidden behind private accounts. A man who had chosen this life on the streets, not out of necessity, but out of disillusionment. Years ago, Watson had walked away from his empire. The greed, the betrayals, the shallow friendships, it had all left him hollow. He wanted to know if true kindness still existed in a world driven by money. So he became invisible, testing humanity one passerby at a time. And for the first time in years, someone had passed his test. Watson watched Anjali disappear into the crowd, his mind already turning with possibilities. This wasn't just an act of kindness. This was fate placing someone extraordinary in his path. Anjali, he whispered under his breath, you've just changed everything. That night, Anjali sat in her tiny apartment. Her stomach grumbled, but her heart felt oddly full. She thought about Watson again and again. She wondered if he had bought himself food, or if he had found shelter from the cold. Despite her own struggles, she prayed for him. On the other side of the city, in a hidden office that none of his street companions even knew existed, Watson removed his disguise. He shed the dirty coat, trimmed his beard, and looked into a mirror. Staring back was not a beggar, but a man whose name commanded respect in boardrooms. He picked up his phone and made a call. Prepare the foundation, he told his assistant. Tomorrow, we begin something new. And find me everything you can about a young woman named Anjali. His lips curved into the same mysterious smile he had given her earlier. She gave me her last coin, he murmured, almost to himself. Now, I'll give her a world she never dreamed of. And so, the story began, of a girl who thought she had lost everything, and a man who had everything but was waiting for someone worth sharing it with. Little did Anjali know, the simple act of kindness she had shown that day would unravel a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Anjali woke to the sound of her alarm clock buzzing on the cracked nightstand beside her bed. She rubbed her tired eyes and pulled the thin blanket closer around her shoulders. Her room was small, barely enough space for a bed, a tiny table, and a single chair. The paint on the walls had started to peel, and the draft from the old window made the room colder than it should have been. Still, she smiled faintly. She remembered Watson, remembered his mysterious eyes, the weight of his voice, and the words he had said. You don't know what you've just done. She shook her head. Strange old man, she muttered softly. But she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting meant something more. Across town, Watson wasn't sitting on the sidewalk anymore. Instead, he sat in a high-rise office, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him as though it had been made for him, which, of course, it had. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, his hair combed back, and his posture was one of authority. The large windows behind him offered a sweeping view of the city's skyline. On the desk before him lay a file with a single name, Anjali Mehra. His assistant, a sharp woman named Clara, stood nearby. We've run a full background check, she reported. She's 26, originally from Jaipur. Parents passed away when she was young, raised by her grandmother, who died 2 years ago. She moved to the city for better opportunities, but she's been struggling financially. Currently unemployed, behind on rent, and has been applying for jobs without much success. Watson nodded slowly, absorbing every word. His eyes softened. She gave me everything she had, he said quietly, almost as if he was speaking to himself. A person with nothing gave, without hesitation. Do you understand how rare that is, Clara? Clara hesitated. With respect, sir, many people might see it as foolish. To give away your last when you can barely survive. No, Watson interrupted firmly. His tone carried the authority of a man who is used to being obeyed. That's not foolishness. That's purity. And I won't let it go unnoticed. Later that day, Anjali walked to the local library. She couldn't afford internet at home, so the library had become her second refuge. She sat at a computer terminal, scrolling through job listings. Each rejection email from the previous weeks replayed in her mind. We regret to inform you. Unfortunately, you are not selected. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. She sighed, resting her forehead on her palm. At that moment, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello, she answered hesitantly. Is this Miss Anjali Mehra? A professional voice asked. Yes. This is the HR department of Watson Enterprises. We received your resume through our recruitment portal, and we'd like to invite you for an interview tomorrow morning. Anjali blinked in confusion. She didn't remember applying to Watson Enterprises. In fact, she barely knew anything about the company, except that it was one of the largest firms in the city, rumored to be run by a mysterious billionaire. Still, her heart skipped a beat. Yes, of course. I'll be there. When the call ended, she sat frozen. Watson Enterprises? How had they even found her resume? She had never dared to apply to such a prestigious firm, but somehow they had. She didn't know that the man she had given her last money to was pulling strings quietly, watching everything unfold. The next morning, Anjali stood nervously in front of the towering Watson Enterprises building. The glass walls reflected the sunlight, and the sheer size of the structure made her feel tiny. She clutched her worn-out handbag tightly, smoothed her simple corslet, and whispered to herself, "You can do this." Inside, the office was a world she had never seen: marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, people in sharp suits walking with purpose. She felt out of place, like a sparrow among eagles. A receptionist greeted her politely and led her to the top floor. Her heart raced. The door opened, and she stepped into a vast office. At the far end, behind a polished desk, sat Watson. But he wasn't the ragged beggar she remembered. He was sharp, confident, and commanding, every inch the powerful businessman. Anjali froze, her mouth falling open. "You," she gasped. Watson's lips curved into that familiar, mysterious smile. "Hello, Anjali." Her mind spun. The man she had given her last money to, the one sitting on the sidewalk in rags, was now in front of her, looking like he owned half the city. What is going on?" she stammered. Watson rose from his chair and walked toward her. His presence filled the room. "What you saw yesterday was one side of me, a side the world rarely knows. But today you see the truth." Anjali shook her head in disbelief. You were pretending?
Why?
Why would someone like you live like that?" Watson studied her carefully before answering. "Because I was searching. For years, I wanted to know if kindness still existed in a world consumed by greed. So I hid myself in plain sight, testing humanity. Thousands walked past me. Some insulted me. Some ignored me. Very few gave even a coin. But you, Anjali, you gave me your last." Anjali felt her knees weaken. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted to help." "And that," Watson said softly, "is exactly why it matters." He returned to his desk and picked up a folder. "You are here because I want to offer you more than just thanks. I want to offer you a chance, a job, a future, and perhaps something greater. You deserve it." Anjali's eyes widened. "But I don't have the qualifications. I'm not like the people out there." She gestured toward the busy office floors. "I can't compete with them." Watson leaned forward, his gaze piercing yet gentle. "What you have cannot be taught in schools or measured in certificates. Integrity, compassion, a heart that gives even when it has nothing. That's what this company and this world needs most." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Anjali's heart raced, torn between disbelief and hope. Finally, she whispered, "Why me?" Watson smiled faintly. "Because you saw me when no one else did." That night, Anjali returned to her tiny apartment, still reeling from the day. The offer letter lay in her hands, its golden emblem shining under the dim bulb. She could hardly believe it. But deep inside, questions swirled. Why had Watson chosen her? What did he truly want? Was this fate, or the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand? Meanwhile, Watson stood by his office window, looking down at the glowing city lights. He thought of Anjali's wide eyes, her disbelief, and the sincerity that radiated from her every word. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." Anjali could hardly sleep that night. She lay on her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with disbelief. Just yesterday, she had given her last money to a man she thought was a beggar. Now, that same man had revealed himself as Watson, the owner of one of the city's most powerful enterprises. Her heart was torn between gratitude and suspicion. Why her? Why would a billionaire hide on the streets? Why had he chosen her of all people? By morning, though, curiosity and necessity won. She dressed in her simplest formal clothes, a borrowed blazer from her neighbor, and returned to Watson Enterprises. When she entered the office, Clara, Watson's assistant, was waiting. Clara's sharp eyes flicked over Anjali's outfit, clearly unimpressed. "Mr. Watson is expecting you," she said briskly, leading her through the glass corridors. Anjali noticed how employees turned their heads to look at her. Their polished shoes and expensive watches seemed to mock her worn-out flats. She felt like she didn't belong. But the moment she stepped into Watson's office, his calm presence steadied her. "Good morning, Anjali," he greeted warmly. "Good morning, sir," she replied hesitantly. He smiled. "No need for sir. Just Watson." It still felt strange, calling a billionaire by his first name. Watson explained her new role. She wasn't going to be shoved into some low-level clerical job. Instead, he wanted her close to him. An assistant, a confidant, someone help him on projects that mattered beyond profit. "You see, Anjali," Watson said, walking to the window overlooking the city, "wealth has given me everything: power, luxury, control. But it also stole something from me: the ability to trust people. Most only see the money, not the man. That's why I went to the streets, to find someone real. And now, I've found you." Anjali shifted uncomfortably. "But I don't know anything about business. What if I disappoint you?" Watson turned, his eyes steady. "Then we'll learn together. What matters isn't what you know, it's who you are." Something about his tone made her chest tighten. It wasn't just about work. It was as though Watson saw something deeper in her, something she hadn't seen in herself. Days turned into weeks. Anjali began working at Watson Enterprises, shadowing him in meetings, learning how decisions were made, how deals were struck. At first, she felt like an imposter, scribbling notes nervously, terrified of making a mistake. But slowly, she discovered her natural instincts. She asked questions others were too proud to ask. She noticed things in proposals that executives overlooked. She spoke with sincerity, which surprised many hardened businessmen used to manipulation and greed. And Watson watched her with quiet satisfaction. One evening, after a long day, he called her into his office. "You remind me of someone," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Who?" she asked. "My younger self," he replied with a wistful smile. "Before money changed everything. Before I learned how cruel the world could be." Anjali hesitated. "Why did you leave it all behind? To live like that?" She didn't say the word beggar, but it hung in the air. Watson's eyes darkened. "Because money blinded the people around me. Friends turned into enemies. Family turned into strangers. I wanted to know if kindness still existed when wealth wasn't involved. That's why I went to the streets." "And you found it," Anjali whispered. "Yes," Watson said, his gaze softening as it lingered on her. "I found it in you." A strange silence filled the room. Anjali's heart beat faster, though she didn't understand why. She quickly lowered her eyes, breaking the moment. But not everyone welcomed her presence. Whispers began circulating through the company. Some employees scoffed at her, calling her the charity case, or Watson's pet project. Even Clara, who carried herself with icy professionalism, was openly skeptical. One afternoon, Anjali overheard two executives whispering near the elevator. "She doesn't belong here. Watson's lost his mind, letting some nobody sit in board meetings. She must have some other hold over him." Their laughter stung worse than she expected. When she returned to Watson's office, he immediately noticed her troubled expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated, then confessed, "They don't think I belong here. And maybe they're right. I'm not like them. I don't have degrees or fancy clothes or experience. I'm just me." Watson walked over, his voice steady but firm. "Listen to me, Anjali. They measure worth by titles and wealth. I measure worth by character. And you have more of it than all of them combined." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "But why do you believe in me so much? You barely know me." Watson paused, then spoke with quiet intensity. "Because when the world saw nothing in me, you saw a man worth helping. Now, I see the same in you." Anjali's breath caught. She wanted to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Weeks later, Watson decided to test her in a way no boardroom could. He invited her to accompany him to a charity gala, an event filled with the city's wealthiest and most powerful people. Anjali balked. "Watson, I can't. I don't have a dress or—" "You'll have one," he interrupted. "And you'll walk beside me with your head held high. Do you know why?" "Why?" she asked nervously. "Because you belong in every room I walk into," he said simply. The night of the gala, Anjali stood in front of the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. Watson had arranged for a simple but elegant gown, nothing ostentatious, but it brought out her natural grace. For the first time, she felt beautiful. When Watson saw her, he paused, almost stunned. "You look," his voice trailed off before he finished softly, "exactly as I knew you would." At the gala, whispers followed them. Powerful men and women raised their eyebrows, some smirked, some whispered cruelly. But Watson never left her side. He introduced her proudly, as though she were his equal. At one point, Anjali whispered nervously, "They're judging me." "Let them," Watson replied. "They judged me when I walked away from all this. Their judgment means nothing." For the first time, she felt his world and hers colliding. And strangely, she didn't feel out of place, not when he was beside her. Later that night, as they left the gala, Watson's car drove them through the quiet city streets. Anjali gazed out the window, the city lights blurring like stars. "Watson," she said softly, "what do you really want from me?" The question hung in the air. Watson looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long silence, he answered with a single word: "Trust." But trust was fragile, and neither of them knew that forces in Watson's world, jealous rivals, suspicious employees, and shadows from his past, were already watching Anjali closely, waiting for the chance to tear their fragile bond apart. Anjali's life had changed faster than she could have imagined. One moment, she had been a struggling young woman with nothing but a few crumpled notes in her wallet. The next, she was working side by side with Watson, a man whose influence stretched across the city. But with every step deeper into his world, she felt the weight of eyes watching her. Whispers at the office grew louder. Rumors spread that she had bewitched him, that she was after his wealth, that Watson, sharp and calculating Watson, was losing his judgment because of her. At first, Anjali tried to ignore it. But soon, the whispers turned to something more dangerous. One evening, as she left the office, a man in a black suit approached her outside the building. He looked official, polished, but there was a hardness in his eyes. "Miss Mara," he said, his tone clipped. "A word of advice. Walk away." Anjali froze. "Excuse me? You think you're special," he continued coldly. "But you're just another distraction. Watson is a powerful man. People have fought years to earn his trust, and you," he sneered, "you don't deserve to stand where you're standing. If you know what's good for you, you'll disappear before you regret it." Her throat tightened. "Are you threatening me?" The man smirked. "Consider it guidance." Then he turned and vanished into the night. Anjali walked home shaken, her thoughts a storm. Who was this man? An employee? A rival? A shadow from Watson's mysterious past? By the time she reached her apartment, she felt trapped in a world she barely understood. The next day, she confronted Watson. "There are people who don't want me here," she said firmly. "I can handle whispers and judgment, but this is dangerous. I need to know what I'm really involved in." Watson studied her silently for a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he motioned for her to sit. "There are things you don't know about me, Anjali," he began quietly. "Things I've kept hidden even from those closest to me. My wealth, my power, it attracts enemies as much as allies. I left it behind once because I was tired of the games. But the truth is, those games never left me. And now, because you're beside me, you're part of them." Her stomach nodded. "Then why bring me here at all?" Watson's gaze softened. "Because I needed to know if trust was still possible. And because for the first time in years, I wanted someone beside me who wasn't blinded by money. Someone real." Anjali's heart pounded. His words stirred something deep inside her, but fear lingered. "And if I can't handle it?" Watson leaned forward, his eyes steady. Then you walk away. No chains, no debts. But if you stay, Anjali, it will change your life forever. That night, she lay awake, torn. Part of her wanted to run back to the simplicity of her old life, even with its struggles. But another part, stronger, felt drawn to him. Not his money, not his empire, but him. The man she had first seen sitting on the street, hiding in plain sight. The man whose eyes carried both pain and hope. She whispered to herself in the dark, "I trust you, Watson." The following week, Watson revealed the depth of his trust. He took her to a private estate on the city's edge, a sprawling mansion that looked like something out of a dream. Inside, vault-like doors opened to reveal rooms filled with files, ledgers, and secrets. "This," Watson said, gesturing to the vast room, "is everything I've built and everything I've hidden. The businesses, the charities, the accounts, the foundations. For years, only I knew the full truth. Now, I'm sharing it with you." Anjali's breath caught. "Why me?" "Because you gave me your last coin," Watson said simply. "When I had nothing to offer you, you gave without expecting anything in return. That single act means more than everything I own combined. So now, I give it all to you not as a gift, but as a trust." Anjali's eyes welled. "Watson, I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied gently. "Just promise me you'll never lose the heart that made you who you are. That's the only treasure I can't buy." But fate had one more test in store. A rival businessman, a man named D'Souza who had always envied Watson's empire, had been watching. Rumors of Watson's mysterious companion had reached him, and he saw an opportunity. One evening, as Anjali left the office alone, she was cornered again, this time by D'Souza's men. "You're the weakness," one of them hissed. "The soft spot in Watson's armor. He trusts you, and that's his mistake." Fear shot through her veins, but she stood her ground. "If you think hurting me will break him, you don't understand him at all." They smirked, moving closer, until a black car screeched to a halt nearby. Watson stepped out, his presence like thunder. "Touch her," he said coldly, "and you'll learn what real power looks like." The men backed away, disappearing into the shadows. Watson rushed to Anjali's side, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her body trembled. "I'm fine. But Watson, this is what I was afraid of. Being with you means being in danger." Watson's voice softened. "And yet, you're still here." Her eyes met his. "Because I trust you." For a long moment, the world around them faded. The city noise, the dangers, the shadows. There was only them, bound by something stronger than fear. Weeks later, in the grand hall of Watson Enterprises, he called an emergency board meeting. Executives gathered, whispering nervously. Anjali stood at the edge, unsure why she was there. Watson rose and spoke with commanding authority. "For years, I've built this empire. But wealth means nothing if it blinds us to humanity. Recently, someone reminded me of that truth." He turned slightly, his eyes meeting Anjali's. "Her name is Anjali Mehra. Some of you doubt her. Some of you mock her. But while you measure worth in profits, she showed me a kind of wealth none of you could ever give, compassion." The room went silent. Watson continued, his voice unwavering. "From this day forward, she is not just my assistant. She is my partner in this enterprise and in my life. If anyone has a problem with that, they can leave." Gasps filled the room. Clara's eyes widened. Executives exchanged stunned glances. Anjali's heart pounded. "Watson, what are you doing?" she whispered. He smiled softly. "Giving the world the answer it's been waiting for. You gave me your last money, Anjali. Now, I give you everything I have." That night, standing together on the balcony of his mansion, Anjali looked at him with tears in her eyes. "When I gave you that money," she said quietly, "I thought it was a small act. I never imagined it would change my life." Watson reached for her hand. "Sometimes, the smallest acts reveal the greatest truths. You saw a beggar, but you found a man. And I saw a girl with nothing, but found the richest soul I've ever known." Anjali smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, she felt not just secure, but truly seen. And Watson, who had once abandoned everything in search of trust, finally found it, in the hands of the girl who had given him her last coin.